My daughter looked me dead in the eye and said, "I can never care about you. When I was young, you were never around." I was surprised because I made sure to always provide for them although I was away for work. Right there, my wife smiled and said, "Don't try to explain." What happened next was rather unbelievable. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Jamie Brown from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. At 66, I thought I'd earned peace. I'd always imagined my final years would be spent tending a small garden, nursing a quiet cup of tea on the back porch, maybe taking slow walks through the neighborhood while waving at people I'd known for decades. I had worked hard my entire life, not in some cozy office or predictable 9-to-5 job, but across distant oil rigs and dusty construction sites in places most people couldn't find on a map. Kuwait, Angola, the outskirts of Kuala Lumpur. I chased contracts like a man possessed. Not out of ambition, but obligation. Every dollar I earned had a name: school fees, house repairs, savings for college. I missed holidays and birthdays. I missed Mariah's first steps, and I missed my own father's funeral. But every month, without fail, I sent money home to Lena. I trusted her to tell Mariah how much I loved her. I never questioned it. I thought being a good provider made me a good man. When I walked through the door for good that spring, it didn't feel like a return. It felt like intrusion. The house I paid off 10 years ago looked smaller somehow, the walls less familiar. Mariah was 31 now, living in a rented apartment downtown, but Lena still lived in the home I'd bought with years of sweat and sacrifice. She greeted me with that same controlled smile she wore at the airport, a little too tight, like she was uncomfortable seeing me full-time. "You're finally home," she said, setting down her wine glass without looking me in the eye. There was no welcome party, no balloons, no sense of completion, just the hum of the refrigerator and the weight of silence. I tried to make the transition easy. I offered to cook on weekends. I suggested Sunday lunches with Mariah. I even proposed family counseling, but Lena brushed it off with a shake of her head. "Don't start fixing things that aren't broken," she said. But something was broken. I could feel it. The air between us crackled with the electricity of unspoken resentment. I couldn't tell if it was hers or mine. Maybe both. I kept telling myself that time would smooth it over, that Mariah would warm up to me, that she just needed time to get used to my presence. But time, as I would soon learn, didn't heal wounds you never knew existed. It happened 2 weeks after I moved back. We were seated around the dining table, me, Lena, and Mariah, eating in that stiff, silent way people do when they've forgotten how to be family. I asked Mariah how work was going. She replied in short, clipped sentences, not rude, but cold. Then I made the mistake of reminiscing how I used to think of her while wiring money back home, how I imagined her opening birthday gifts I'd mailed from Singapore. She looked up then, dead in the eye, and said, "I can never care about you. When I was young, you were never around." The words didn't come like an accusation. They came like a final verdict. Her voice didn't shake. Her eyes didn't soften. It was a sentence passed by someone who had already made peace with her judgment. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came. I turned to Lena, desperate for her to say something, to explain, to correct Mariah's understanding of the past. But instead, she leaned back in her chair and said with a sly little smirk, "Don't try to explain. You were always away indeed." That was the moment everything tilted. The ground beneath my sense of fatherhood crumbled. I had sacrificed decades to give them everything I never had, and somehow, I'd become the villain. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, not from anger, but from confusion. Was I crazy? Had I imagined all the effort I'd made? The wire transfers, the late-night calls, the suitcases full of gifts? It didn't matter. My daughter believed I had abandoned her, and the woman I trusted to hold my place while I was gone had just confirmed it with a smile. I barely touched my food after that. I excused myself early, retreated to the guest room, my room now, apparently. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the blank wall, feeling like a stranger in my own life. All those years, I believed I was investing in something solid. something that would be waiting for me at the end of the road. But now it felt like I'd sent money into a black hole, and in return, I'd come home to a daughter who hated me and a wife who weaponized my absence. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, playing the dinner scene over and over in my mind. I kept hearing Mariah's voice, flat and final. I kept seeing Lena's smile. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, I knew I hadn't come home. I just walked into the second half of a story I hadn't been allowed to read. The morning after that dinner, I moved like a ghost through the house. My footsteps seemed too loud against the hardwood floor, like I was disturbing something sacred, or maybe just unwelcome. Lena was in the kitchen, humming softly as she wiped down the counters, acting as though the night before hadn't happened. I watched her for a few seconds, trying to find some trace of the woman I married, the girl I once sat under a mango tree with in Port Harcourt, talking about dreams and babies and a future we hadn't even begun to build. But there was nothing in her face except ease, even satisfaction. She poured herself a cup of coffee and walked past me without so much as a glance. Mariah said she's not coming back for lunch next Sunday, she said over her shoulder, almost casually. Like my daughter had simply declined a social engagement, not dropped a bomb in the middle of my chest the night before. I sat at the kitchen table, numb, staring at the sunlight crawling across the tiled floor. Every second of my absence felt like it was coming back to accuse me. I remembered video calling on birthdays and hearing only Lena's voice while Mariah was napping. I remembered wiring money for Christmas gifts, school fees, dentist visits, always trusting Lena to let Mariah know it came from me. And I remembered the growing silence from my daughter as she entered her teens. I thought it was normal, a phase. I told myself, she'll understand one day. When she's older. When she sees everything I did for us. But apparently, she hadn't. And if Lena's smirk meant anything, it was because she never gave Mariah the chance to. The weight of the silence grew unbearable. I left the house that afternoon, not sure where I was going, but needing air. I ended up in a park not far from Mariah's apartment. I'd been there once, years ago, when she was still in primary school. I remembered pushing her on the swings and buying her puff puffs from a vendor near the gate. Back then, she used to call me Papa with such joy, her small hand wrapped tightly around my finger. The memory twisted in my gut. I'd missed too much. But I hadn't been absent. That distinction mattered to me. I wasn't some deadbeat who disappeared and left his family to suffer. I was a man who sacrificed presence for provision, believing the two could somehow be equal. Lena knew that. She knew it better than anyone. I called Mariah the next day. She didn't answer. I texted her. Can we talk? No response. I didn't want to pressure her, but I also couldn't leave things as they were. After a week of silence, I drove to her building and waited in my car until she pulled into the lot. She looked surprised, maybe even a little nervous. "What are you doing here?" she asked, not unkindly, but firmly. I got out slowly, hands up like I was surrendering. "I just want to talk," I said. "Please." She agreed to 10 minutes in a nearby cafe. We sat in a corner booth. She ordered tea. I didn't order anything. My throat felt too tight. For the first few minutes, we just sat there, the noise of the cafe buzzing around us like flies. Then she looked at me, eyes sharp but guarded. "You were gone my whole life," she said. "Everything I needed, Mom gave it. Every time I cried, every doctor's visit, every school event. You weren't there. I don't remember you being present for anything." Her voice didn't shake, but there was hurt behind it, heavy and worn. I listened. I didn't defend myself. Not yet. I just took in her pain, let it wash over me like acid. After a long pause, I said, "You're right. I wasn't there the way I should have been. But I didn't disappear. I was working. I was providing. Every step of the way, I thought I was doing what was best." She folded her arms and shook her head. "That's the thing, Dad. You thought. You never asked. You just assumed sending money was enough." That stung more than anything. Because it was true. I had assumed. I believed that Lena would fill in the emotional gaps, that she'd remind Mariah of why I was gone. I thought Lena and I were a team. But clearly, I'd been playing a solo game, and the coach had changed the rules behind my back. "I used to ask about you," Mariah said suddenly, voice quieter now. "When I was younger, I'd ask when you were coming back, if you remembered my birthday. And Mom would just say, 'Your father is busy. Don't count on him for anything.'" She looked at me, and her eyes were brimming now. So eventually, I stopped asking. That was when the anger crept in. Not at her, but at Lena. How could she? How could she take a little girl's questions and feed them into a machine of bitterness? I clenched my fist beneath the table, not to lash out, but to hold anything in place. Mariah, I said, gently, I have every wire transfer, every email, every letter I sent. I want to show you. Not to defend myself, but because you deserve to know the full picture. She looked away. I don't know if that changes anything, she said. I spent my whole life thinking you didn't care. I know, I whispered. But it wasn't true, and I can prove it. She nodded slowly, not agreeing, but not rejecting the idea either. Send it to me, she said. Let me see. That was all I needed. When I got back to the house, Lena was waiting on the porch, wine glass in hand. She looked at me like she already knew where I'd been. Trying to fix your image, huh? She said with a dry chuckle. I didn't answer. I walked past her, into the study, and began pulling out boxes. Because now it was time, not just to remember, but to reveal. I didn't sleep that night either, but this time it wasn't because of pain, it was purpose. I stayed in the study, surrounded by boxes I hadn't touched in years, pulling out old files like a man digging for his own resurrection. I wasn't trying to win a debate. I wasn't even sure I wanted to keep the past intact anymore. But my daughter had given me a sliver of permission, a doorway barely cracked open, and I wasn't going to waste it. Every piece of paper I pulled out was a testament, not just to my effort, but to the kind of love that doesn't come wrapped in hugs and bedtime stories. Mine was the love of bank transfers, customs declarations, scribbled notes written at midnight in an airport terminal. And now, I had to lay it all bare. I started with the receipts. Years of remittance records printed from my bank's overseas branch. Every one of them had Lena's name and account, the dates matching up with tuition cycles, utility bills, holidays. There was the $5,000 I sent when Mariah needed braces. The $3,200 for a school field trip to Cape Town when she was 13. The $800 for a laptop in her first year at university. I found handwritten letters I posted from Qatar. Some never opened, still sealed in their envelopes. One read, Mariah, my little moon, I hope you're eating well. I'm sorry I can't be there for your school play. I know you'll shine. I'll be thinking of you. I touched the ink like it could take me back. I found photos, 2 snapshots I took of toys and books I bought for her, things I mailed home, hoping they'd remind her I cared even from afar. In one, I'm holding a doll I picked up in Dubai, smiling like a fool. In another, there's a box set of children's books I had signed by an author she loved. I'd mailed them from Singapore with a note that said, for Mariah's bedtime, may she always dream big. And then, in the bottom of a box marked Home Documents, I found something I hadn't even remembered, a journal I kept for 2 years when the loneliness got to be too much. In it, I wrote letters to Mariah I never sent, pages filled with apologies, explanations, and hopes. The next day, I bought a binder and filled it with everything, receipts, letters, photos, printed emails. I arranged it in chronological order. I added post-it notes explaining what each item was, why I sent it, how it related to her life at the time. I didn't want it to feel like a defense file. I wanted it to feel like a love story told backwards, one she never got to read. That evening, I sat on the front porch with the binder on my lap. Lena stepped out, wine glass as usual, and stared at the thick folder. What's that? She asked, half smiling, half sneering. Your evidence? I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt the sadness settle deep in my bones. There was no remorse in her eyes. No flicker of doubt. Only the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent years controlling the narrative and wasn't ready to give it up. Yes, I said simply. It's everything she never knew. Everything you never told her. She scoffed and sat on the opposite end of the porch. And what's that going to do? Change her childhood? Rewrite her memories? No, I said, but it might make her question yours. Her face darkened, just slightly. Then she said, you think she's going to forgive you because you sent money? That you're going to undo all the years you were gone with a few receipts? I leaned forward. No, I think she might forgive me because the truth deserves a voice, even if it's late. Lena didn't respond. She sipped her wine and stared into the street, the quiet between us louder than any argument we'd ever had. I wanted to ask her why. Why she poisoned my daughter's mind against me. Why she erased me from their story. But I already knew the answer, or at least the shape of it. Bitterness. Resentment. Maybe even loneliness of her own. She must have felt abandoned too, and instead of telling me, she fed that feeling to Mariah like medicine disguised as truth. And over the years, it became gospel. Later that night, I messaged Mariah and asked if she'd be willing to meet again. She replied the next morning, okay, just for a bit. That was more than I expected. I packed the binder into a clean leather case and drove to the same cafe. She was already there, sitting with a chai latte, tapping her nails nervously against the cup. I sat down, careful not to crowd her. I brought this, I said, placing the case gently on the table. It's not an argument. It's a record. I just want you to see it. Take it, don't take it. But it's yours if you want it. She stared at it for a moment, then pulled it toward her slowly. She opened the binder and flipped through a few pages. I watched her eyes scan the receipts, the notes, the photos. Her fingers paused on a picture of the doll I'd sent when she was 6. Then she turned to the letter I wrote from Angola during the time she had chickenpox. Her hand went to her mouth, and for a second, I saw the wall crack. Why didn't she tell me? She whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. She closed the binder and held it tightly in her lap. I need time, she said. But thank you. I nodded. Take all the time you need. As she walked away with the binder in her arms, I felt something shift, just a fraction. The house was still broken. The marriage was still a lie. But for the first time in years, the truth was out in the open. And truth, I had learned, was slow medicine. It doesn't heal overnight, but it heals. I didn't hear from Mariah for 2 weeks after I gave her the binder. Every day, I woke up with my phone beside my pillow, checking it before my eyes were even fully open. Nothing. I tried not to imagine the worst, that she'd tossed the binder in the trash or that Lena had gotten to her first, spinning some counter-narrative soaked in hurt pride and half-truths. I spent those days in a strange limbo, moving through the house like a visitor. Lena and I barely spoke. She didn't ask if Mariah had called, and I didn't offer any updates. The silence between us had thickened into something almost physical, like fog or smoke, the kind that gets into your lungs and lingers. Then one morning, just after sunrise, I got a text. It was from Mariah. Can we talk? I'm outside. My heart jumped to my throat. I scrambled out of bed, pulling on the same shirt from the day before, and rushed to the front door. There she was, standing on the porch with the binder in her hands. She looked tired, like she hadn't been sleeping either. Her eyes were red, but her mouth was steady. Can we go for a drive? She asked. I nodded, grabbing my keys without a word. We didn't talk much on the way. I let the radio hum low in the background, giving her space. We ended up at a lookout point on the edge of town, one of those quiet places with benches and wide views where people go to breathe and sometimes cry. She stepped out first, walking slowly to the railing. I followed, standing a few feet beside her. I read everything, she said, her voice soft but sure. Twice. I waited. Let her lead. I felt like I was reading someone else's life, she continued. Like all these years I had a puzzle with half the pieces missing. And suddenly, there it was, proof that the person I thought you were wasn't real. I swallowed hard. I never meant to disappear. I thought I was doing the right thing, providing, making sure you and your mom had everything. She nodded, still facing the horizon. I believe that now. But growing up, she made it sound like you didn't care. Like you just left and never looked back. That she was the one who kept everything together. I thought she was a hero. She was a hero in her own way, I said, but the words tasted like ash. But she also kept you from knowing me. Mariah turned to me then, her eyes full. I don't know what hurts more. The fact that I believed her, or the fact that you let her be the messenger all those years. That one cut deep. Because she was right. I had left Lena to be the emotional bridge. I trusted her too much. I gave her the role without realizing she'd been burning it down behind me. I'm sorry, I said, every word thick with weight. I should have done more than just send money. I should have made sure you knew I was trying. She nodded slowly, the wind tugging at her curls. There's a lot I'm angry about, but I'm also confused. About her. About everything. I don't know what to do with all this. I didn't push. I didn't beg. I just said, take your time. I'll be here. She nodded again, but this time, her lips pressed into something almost like a smile. Not joy, not forgiveness, but the beginning of something that might grow into understanding. Later that night, when I returned home, Lena was in the kitchen, sipping her wine, flipping through a magazine like it was any other night. I watched her for a moment, then said, "I want a divorce." She looked up slowly, her eyes blank. "So this is what it's come to. This is what it's been for a long time," I said. "I just finally see it now." She set her glass down with a soft clink. "All because I told the truth." "No," I said, "because you told your truth and buried mine." Her laugh was short and bitter. "You were gone, Tund, for years. You think wiring money makes you a saint? You left me to raise her alone, and I trusted you to raise her with me." I replied, my voice steady. "You had a choice. You could have told her why I was gone. You could have told her I loved her. But you didn't. She needed someone present," she snapped. "So did I said quietly. "But you chose resentment, and you made sure she inherited it." She didn't respond. She just looked at me, and for the first time in a long while, I saw something flicker across her face, guilt, maybe, or the dawning realization that her grip was loosening. I slept in the guest room again that night, and the night after. I called a lawyer the next morning. I wasn't angry anymore, not the kind of rage that burns fast and hot. This was the colder, cleaner kind. The kind that comes when you've stopped waiting for an apology and started reclaiming your own peace. A few days later, Mariah texted me again, "Can I bring my son to visit?" I stared at that message for a long time before replying. And when I did, it was with tears in my eyes. Yes, anytime. Filing the divorce papers felt less like an act of war and more like a quiet burial. There was no drama, no shouting match in the lawyer's office. Just signatures and silence. Lena sat across from me, immaculate in her pressed white blouse and gold earrings, looking every bit like the woman who'd built a reputation for strength and elegance in our community. But her eyes never met mine. Not once. She signed each page like she was filling out a tax return, routine, impersonal, final. And as I watched her initials fill the lines that would end a 35-year marriage, I felt nothing but a hollow kind of peace. No triumph, no glee. Just the solemn confirmation that we had become strangers wearing the same history. Word spread quickly, as it always does. Old friends called with concern, curiosity thinly veiled as compassion. My younger brother, Emeka, reached out from Abuja, clearly stunned. "Tund, at your age," he said, "you want to start over now?" His voice was full of that careful judgment people wrap in the tone of love. "You'll grow old alone. You're not a young man anymore." "I've been alone," I replied. "At least now it'll be honest. Somewhere more blunt." A cousin called it a midlife rebellion. An old church friend suggested counseling, as if that would turn back time and unmake the lies. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. The truth had already been too long in hiding. Let it breathe on its own now. I wasn't angry at them. They'd only ever seen the smiling photos, the coordinated outfits at weddings, the social media updates Lena curated so carefully. But behind every perfect image was a long silence, a slow erasure. Lena didn't fight me. She didn't ask for much, just the house, which I let her keep without resistance. I didn't want it anymore. Too many ghosts lived there now. I took a small apartment across town, not far from the park where I'd once pushed Mariah on the swings. It had 2 bedrooms, even though I only needed one. I told myself I'd keep the second ready for her, for my grandson, for hope. Mariah came by the first weekend after I moved in. She brought her son, a serious little boy named Deo with big eyes and an even bigger appetite. He looked at me like I was a new character in a story, someone he wasn't sure whether to trust. I didn't push. I gave him space, let him play on the rug with his toy cars while Mariah and I sat at the small dining table sipping tea. She looked around the apartment with quiet curiosity. "It's nice," she said. "Simple. It's peaceful," I replied. "That's enough for me now." We sat in a long, thoughtful pause, the kind that used to feel heavy but now just felt honest. She finally spoke. "She told me you'd never survive on your own, that you needed her to stay grounded." I smiled a little. She wasn't wrong about that. For a long time, I did need her. But not like this. Mariah nodded, brushing her hand across the table's surface. "I don't know how to feel about everything. Some days I'm angry. Some days I feel like a fool. Other times, I feel sad for her, for all the bitterness she held on to. She was hurt, I said softly, but she chose what she did with that hurt. We all do. Mariah leaned back in her chair, eyes wet but steady. I'm trying to forgive her. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying. I reached across the table and took her hand. That's all you can do. Try. Later, she helped me hang some art on the walls, photos I'd framed of places I'd worked in, Malaysia, South Africa, the UAE. She asked questions, and I told her stories I never thought I'd get to share. For the first time, she was seeing me not just as the ghost from her childhood, but as a man with years and miles behind him. Someone who made mistakes, yes, but someone who had also tried. That evening, after she left, I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the worn edge of the rug. And I realized I didn't miss the old house. I didn't miss the forced conversations with Lena, the curated life we'd kept for appearances. What I missed, what I was just starting to rebuild, was a connection that could breathe. Something real. A week later, Lena called. It was short. I thought you should know I'm going to Lagos for a while. Need some time away. I didn't ask why. I just said, I hope you find what you're looking for. There was a pause. Then she replied, you were always better at surviving than I gave you credit for. I didn't respond. She hung up. That was the last time we spoke. There's a quiet that comes with age, the kind that doesn't feel like loneliness, but more like a gentle undoing of all the noise you once thought you needed. My apartment, small, sunlit, always smelling faintly of the citrus cleaner I'd come to like, became less a retreat and more a canvas. I filled it with the things I'd carried for years but never displayed. A carved wooden box from my time in Nairobi, a brass lamp I bought in Bahrain, even a threadbare scarf Mariah made in primary school that Lena had once stashed away in a drawer without ceremony. I pinned it on the wall above my reading chair. It wasn't decoration, it was a reminder that not everything had been lost. Mariah started visiting every other weekend. At first, it was just her and Deo. Then it was just her. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we just sat together, each in our own thoughts, the TV murmuring in the background, the space between us less like a chasm and more like a bridge under construction. I never asked for more. I didn't want to rush what was already so fragile. Trust, I'd learned, doesn't grow back in a day. It sprouts slowly, hesitant and unsure, but it grows, if you let it. One Sunday, she brought over old photo albums, ones I hadn't seen in decades. Most of the pictures were from her childhood. Birthday parties, school events, beach trips, all snapshots of a life I'd funded but never touched. I saw her dressed as a butterfly for a school play, grinning beside classmates, and I realized I had no memory of that moment. Because I wasn't there. She pointed out friends, teachers, stories I didn't know. And I listened. That day wasn't about explaining my absence. It was about honoring what she experienced, even if it didn't include me. But toward the bottom of one album, tucked behind a faded picture of her third birthday cake, was something unexpected, a photograph I had sent from Jakarta. I was wearing a ridiculous floral shirt and holding a hand-painted kite I'd planned to mail home. Mariah picked it up slowly, studying it. I remember this, she murmured. It was on the fridge for a while. Then one day it was just gone. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. We both knew who had taken it down. She looked at me then, something like sadness, or maybe resolve settling in her face. There's still so much I don't understand. So much I missed. Me too, I said. But I'm still here. If you want to fill in the blanks together, we can. She nodded, her fingers brushing the edge of the photo. I like that. In the months that followed, our rhythm became almost familiar. She called when Deo had a fever or when she was just too tired to cook. I'd drive over with soup, or she'd come here with bags of groceries and take over my kitchen like she'd always belonged in it. One night, we stayed up late watching old home videos I hadn't even known existed. Lena's voice narrated most of them, but occasionally, just occasionally, there was a letter I'd written being read aloud. I didn't know she'd done that. I clung to those moments like life rafts. There was no grand reunion, no tearful monologue, but there was growth. Mariah started asking about my time abroad, not just as filler conversation, but with genuine curiosity. She wanted to know what it was like living in Dubai during the construction boom, or how lonely it felt being the only Nigerian in a remote village in Kazakhstan. I told her everything, even the parts one used to skip, the days I cried alone in cramped apartments, the birthdays I spent watching grainy videos of her singing happy birthday to someone else. I let her see the man behind the myth, or at least the myth her mother had carefully built. And eventually, she asked the question I hadn't expected to hear. Did you ever resent me? The truth came easy. Never. I resented time. I resented distance. I resented silence. But not you. Never you. She cried then. Not loud or messy. Just quiet tears that slid down her face while I sat beside her and didn't try to fix it. I just let her cry. She was mourning a story she believed her whole life. One that was unraveling in her hands. One evening, Deo spent the night at my place. We played board games, watched cartoons, and I tucked him in on the old pull-out couch with fresh sheets and a nightlight. As I turned off the lamp, he whispered, "Grandpa?" I paused at the doorway. "Yes, champ. You love my mommy?" My chest tightened, and I smiled into the dark. More than anything. He nodded, satisfied, and drifted off. That night, I stood by the window, watching the city lights blink softly in the distance. I thought of Lena. I didn't hate her. I didn't even wish her harm. But I had learned that sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from enemies. They come from those who claim to love you, but cannot celebrate your efforts unless they control the story. And for too long, I'd let someone else hold the pen. Now, the pen was back in my hand. I ended my journal entry that night with a simple truth. I lost a marriage, but I found my daughter. And that, at this age, feels like grace. Because even after all the years lost, all the love misdirected, and all the silence endured, there was still something left to give. If this story moved you or reminded you of a family truth that's long been buried, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotionally powerful stories just like this one. Every story we tell here uncovers the hidden battles behind closed doors, and your support helps bring these voices to light. See you soon in the next story.